We're live. Okay. Hey, everybody. Father Peter here. Yay. Cyra Borsy. She's back. You know, it's hard to get on my video log 2 times in a row, but Cyra is worth this. Let me tell you, I'm so excited you're here, Cyra. Yeah, nice. So, Cyra, we spoke 7, 8 weeks ago, I think, something like that. We talked about youth ministry and your great work with youth. And that was really meaningful to a lot of people. But I've invited you back here because I want to share who you are and, you know, your life experience with a greater group of people rather than just with me and with our staff. Everybody, Cyra is back here. As you may or may not know, we are in the midst of a conversation taking place at St. Mark's, Race in America Today. And Cyra has a lot to say about this. We all are very much aware of what's happening in our country and the Black Lives Matter movement and the importance of that, the prophetic importance of that, and the awakening of the broader white culture to the issues that people of color have. There's another element to this that oftentimes does not get as much airtime, so to speak, and that is, as we talk about Black and brown people, perhaps we might think of that also as in some sense, brown lives matter too. And Cyra, you grew up a Puerto Rican girl in Queens, and throughout your life, you have lived in many locations, and you live predominantly in a white community now. So you have experienced race from many different aspects. I wonder if you might just begin by telling us a little bit about your household of nurture, you know, the background of your father and your mother, and growing up in Queens and what that was like for you.
So my father is Puerto Rican. He was born mainland, which means he grew up in East Harlem. His parents came over from Puerto Rico and settled in East Harlem. My grandfather owned a bodega and they lived behind it. And so that was their source of income. My father went to public school. Interestingly, wasn't like a fabulous student, wasn't really applied. He, as a goof, took an entrance exam to City University where he got accepted. He was not anticipating that, you know, which is kind of funny, considering, you know, he went on to, you know, teachers college and stuff like that. My mother is an immigrant. She's of Spanish descent. She's from an area in the northwest part of Spain called Galicia. And she came to the United States when she was, I think, about 15 years old. My mother's parents had been separated because of the Spanish Civil War. So shortly after my mother was born, my grandfather came to New York. He had already been in New York many times. I believe he was already an American citizen at that time. But after my mother was born, he came back to the U.S. For work, and my grandparents were separated for about 15 years until my grandmother and my mother got passage through Portugal to come to the United States, where they were joined together. My parents. As a side, my parents were set up on a blind date. And I think it's kind of funny because their friends were like, well, he speaks Spanish, she speaks Spanish, maybe it'll work, kind of thing. Interestingly enough, it did. And so the rest is sort of history.
Yeah, and a kind of amazing history that it is. Your mom, the shortest woman in the world, most powerful short woman on the planet Earth, and your father, Nathan, who grew up to be the first Hispanic Latino chancellor of.
There was a guy before him.
Okay, numero dos. The second chancellor of the New York City school system. There's 1 million students in the New York City school system. It's like being the mayor of a large city, really. Yeah. As a kid, you grew up in Queens and you experienced multiracial life there. Say a little bit about that. Your girlhood leading to your womanhood and the different contexts in which you have experienced being a Puerto Rican, of Puerto Rican descent, Spanish descent, and how the context of that has changed in your life and how it's sort of worked out for you.
Yeah, so I grew up in Little Neck, and very, small elementary school. So small that some of the classrooms, third, fourth, and fifth grade were combined. Third, fourth, fifth, and sixth were combined. I thought no differently from anybody else. My friends in school were from all over, and by that I mean their ethnicity was reflective of New York City. So, various backgrounds: Hungarian, Italian, Polish, as well as Black and fellow Hispanics. Our family was the only Hispanic family on the block. And I was sort of aware of that to a degree, but I really became more aware of my own ethnicity much more as I got older, and it started to be sort of more pointed out to me, where people would see my last name and ask me about it. And, that happened more in middle school. Certainly in high school, and definitely when I went to college. It was kind of, in college was probably where I experienced the most uncomfortableness, where people would ask me about, they would look at me sort of squinty-eyed and say, "So your last name?" And I would, say, "Yeah," innocently and maybe naively so. And, inevitably when I explained that I was, Puerto Rican, Hispanic, "Oh, uh-huh." And it's kind of like, you're not really sure what they're fishing for, because I had never really experienced that kind of thing. And so I just didn't really know how to take it, but I would always make a mental note when that happened. And I think in college was the first time I really heard the word "spick" used in like a derogatory way in a group that I was hanging out with. And I, quickly wanted to regurgitate my lunch first, but also I quickly said to them, I'm Hispanic, I'm Puerto Rican. And they would say, "Well, but you're not that Puerto Rican." And I was like really affronted, and I would say, "Hey, you can't say that to me, because my blood is no different from anybody else's. And why are you saying that to me? Because I don't fit the stereotype that you think of when it comes to being Puerto Rican." And I really pushed them on it. And I'm going to say something that's really uncomfortable, but I said to them, "Because I don't have like hoochie heels and the satin tight pants, that you don't view me as a Puerto Rican woman? Why? Because I don't have a can of spray paint in my hand, that you don't view me as a Hispanic?" And I, that obviously that friendship ended. But, it's that uncomfortableness that, it's the first time that, and I remember leaving, and like, even though I didn't want to feel this way, like, it made me feel dirty. Like the way that they were speaking to me, it didn't make me feel good. And I'm very proud of my ethnicity, but I can't describe really the uncomfortableness and, the sort of, it's like one of those moments I just want to remove my skin and just walk away, and just, "Can you not see me? Can you just not see me?" Kind of thing. And, so yeah, that was sort of through my college and stuff. So
You said that there have been times in your experiences where it seemed uncool
yeah,
to be of
yeah,
Hispanic origin. Other times it was like, oh, it's cool to be Hispanic. Everyone's like, oh, isn't that great? And it was like, oh, no, it's uncool again.
right.
And I mean, you're the same person regardless of whether or not anybody knows of your background, or you are, you know, beautiful in the wholeness of who you are. And yet you were
Yeah.
you were kind of in style and out of style, in style and out of style. That's what I'm getting
I
at.
know. So yeah, I mean, growing up, I think it was, you know, there for my parents, I wonder about, you know, it not really being so stylish to be of Spanish speaking descent. And realize I'm going to say this is my experience. Okay. So I'm not speaking for the whole, you know, Hispanic community. This is my experience. So, you know, I'm sure that also played a lot into their decision as to whether or not to speak Spanish to our kids. I can't imagine that it would not. So, you know, there was that non-coolness, and then you grow up and, you know, there's also another element there, like, where people find out you have a Spanish last name. Oh, you speak Spanish. Oh, that's awesome. You know, can you speak it? Do you speak it at home? And it was kind of fashionable, if you remember. Like, I was a teenager in the 80s and, you know, in 90s, and it was kind of fashionable to speak a second language. It wasn't really thought about terribly much. In fact, there was talk about, you know, kids learning Spanish as a second language. You know, we would talk about the population of Hispanics growing and what that was looking like. And then, you know, just a few years ago, you know, because of immigration and everything, it suddenly became, you know, not really a cool thing to be of Spanish-speaking descent or of a Spanish-speaking heritage. And we could see that played out on various videos, whether people, you know, would go in to pick up a coffee or a hamburger, and the people behind the counter were speaking Spanish, and the people being served were not so happy about that. And so, you know, you think about that, and I remember, you know, articulating this to, you know, my husband and my kids, saying, you know, if that person behind the counter were speaking French, would that have had the same reaction? If that person had been speaking German, would that have had the same reaction? And I don't think it would have. I think if it was somebody speaking French, they would not have said anything. But because it was such a volatile time, and I'm not saying that it's less volatile, but because at that moment, because of all of the discussion about illegal immigration, I think that's, you know, when it really became not so fashionable anymore to speak Spanish. And I remember being with my mother. My mom lives in Washington Heights, as does my middle sister and her family. And they would tell the workers, please be careful to not speak Spanish out in public, you know, because you don't know who's listening, and you don't know who could be looking to pick you up. And, you know, my mother's witnessed ICE picking up illegals, or I guess they were thought to be illegals. I don't know what the outcome was, but she was completely traumatized by the whole event, you know, how they were treated and everything like that, which they were not treated nicely. And, you know, so I think there comes a point again where you sort of are hiding the fact that, you know, do I let people know, you know, what my ethnicity is? If, you know, do I dare speak Spanish? You know, my mother had been with me. This is a more recent example. You know, my mother had been with me to visit, I think it was in the fall, and we were at Walter Stewart's, and I like I said, I don't speak Spanish fluently. I am fluent in Spanglish, okay? And so my mother is in the passenger, going into the passenger door, and I'm at the driver's door, and my mother and I are speaking to each other back and forth in Spanish, and there was a woman going into the liquor store, and she stopped dead in her tracks and turned around and looked at us. And she looked at me, and she looked at my mother, and I looked at my mother, and I looked at the lady. I didn't know what was going on. And so I smiled at the woman. I didn't know what the deal was. And she turned back around to continue heading into the liquor store. And my mother continued to ask me something in Spanish. I continued to answer, and the woman turned around again. And so at that point, we just got into the car. My mother looked at me and she said, "What do you think that was about?" And I said to her, "I think we know what that was about." And, it just, we grow up teaching our kids, you should be proud of where you come from, right? Be proud of those who came before you. I am so proud of, the accomplishments that my father made. He wasn't a man of means. And look at all he was able to accomplish. My mother didn't go to college, but was very astute and read, and everything that they were able to provide to myself and my sisters, I couldn't be more grateful for. And you instill that in your own kids. And then to be in those moments, it's kind of gutting in a way. And, so I just pray for compassion, and I pray for a soft-heartedness on the other end, on who I'm receiving that from. So.
Wow, thank you again for sharing your insights here with us. So, the country is a big country. We used to live in Arizona, and a very large portion of the state of Arizona, as you know, is Hispanic. And when we lived there, we were really introduced to Hispanic culture as it mixes with English cultures and many other cultures too. But I don't know if you read in the paper this morning about the Tucson Police Department and Hispanic man of 25, I think he was 25 years old, also in that upside down prone position, a Hispanic man who died. And so just to say that, police brutality and abuse extends beyond just the Black community, I think is most assuredly a true statement. And the cities of Los Angeles, another young Latino young man was also killed in the same sort of way that makes you just feel like there's a banality of evil that's present in the treatment of people that is seems unhuman or inhuman.
Yeah. And I was thinking about this, what you're saying, about the treatment of humans. And, I think about, what we're charged with when we welcome kids that are into the church, the newly baptized, right? And we say the baptismal covenant, right? And you ask of us, will you seek and serve Christ in all persons, loving your neighbor as yourself? And we respond, I will with God's help. And then the next is, will you strive for justice and peace among all people and respect the dignity of every human being? And we respond, I will with God's help. That doesn't end when we leave the church doors. We have to really live that out in our lives. And it's not always easy. And, I think a little compassion, just, a little gut check moment, is not a bad thing. None of us are like, perfect in this life. We're all making, I know I'm making mistakes every single day. That's the glory of being human, right? And so the challenge of Christianity is really living into our baptismal covenant and living into what it is that we're called to do. And it's not easy, you know, I I have to have compassion for those who you know, turn around and look at me when I am speaking Spanish with my mother. And, you know, I have to have compassion for the police officers, you know, when they're doing harm to our fellow humans, especially our Black brothers and sisters. It's horrific. It's really horrific.
Yeah, you know, those last two parts of the baptismal covenant to treat everybody as Christ, which is really the spirituality that's embedded in the Book of Common Prayer, and also basically to love your neighbor as yourself, right? To which is what that last one is about, all people. I mean, if the world just did that, we would be in a way better place. But the world ain't doing that. Not everybody in the world, of course, is. There are many. You know, people of good heart and good faith seeking to make the world a better place. So, and in fact, we are living in a time when I think if there's a sort of prophetic surge of awakening in our world to structural and systemic racism.
Yeah.
And I wonder if you might just have a word about how you experience this time where, which is, I don't know that there's been another time where worldwide the Black Lives Matter movement is making such an impact. I mean, I watched a little bit of a Man U soccer game the other day, and all the players in the Premier League have Black Lives Matter in the back of their jerseys. It's on the little advertising strip that goes around the fields. All that's happening, it's terrible, and all that's happening, that's really beautiful. I mean, what do you make of all that?
I mean, it really is heartening. And I keep on thinking, you know, I wake up and I think, okay, what are we doing today to move it to the next step? You know, and maybe that's too much to think like every single day there's going to be a new step, but why not? Why can't there be? And these are so not easy questions, you know, the statuary and, you know, some things are very complicated, and you know, we've not done a good job of sort of penance as a country for evils that we've done, and it's okay because there's always time to, you know, to say I can do better, and I'm sorry for the sins currently and sins of the past, even if that's what you feel the need to be called to do. I am hopeful that things will continue to be pushed forward, and that we can continue to live into the people that we're supposed to be. And I think that I don't want to live just like an average life. I want to live a superior life. I want to, you know, knock it out of the ballpark. Why not? Why shoot low? You know, we should just be living to our fullest. And I think that all of these things, it does make me happy. It also, every time a new video surfaces, you know, I watched the videos of the Hispanic men also, and I had to stop because it's just knowing that it's there is enough. I think for me personally, I don't need to, I think, subject myself to more of that. I really hope that there are ways that, you know, it just can be moved forward, that police can, you know, not all policemen are bad. So many of them are, you know, alongside of the Black Lives Matter movement, and what a beautiful thing that is. And, you know, maybe this is the way of moving forward, is these small little steps. But I think we just need to continue to do the steps. My worst fear is that the steps stop, that we stop walking, and that it just comes to a halt, and that just would be heartbreaking for me.
Yeah, you know, one of the things I said in the interview with Tom Jones, I think in the conversations with Tom, was that the devastating part of a huge wave is actually not the top of the wave that you can see. It's all the water underneath it that moves in and wipes out your house or wipes out property. And my great hope is that it's really not the things we see on TV, but it's the big surge of the common woman and the common man who is so awakened to say, this isn't just a season. This is what we have for the rest of our lives.
Yeah.
This is a work of the rest of our lives.
Yeah. And I was really moved also. There was a letter written by a young adult in our midst about, challenging our own school system about what could they do better. Why can't we here do better? It starts with all of us. Yeah,
I mean, that's a little bit about my Sunday sermon here. Hey, how's that for folks? My Sunday sermon.
That's a good setup.
On the gospel with this Sunday, which says about prophecy, and Jesus says, the reward of just giving somebody a cold drink of water, sort of thing, just doing the little thing. But I talked to Alison Grosecki, a Hebrew scripture scholar in our parish, saying that her great professor, Professor Wilson, said the prophecy is addressed to you personally, not to the whole system, and that we all need to hear this rising to each of us personally. As we kind of draw toward the close here, the glory of God as a human being fully alive. You don't live a boring life. I wonder if you might just share with us all a little bit about what it is that makes you so fully alive, and whether or not it's your personal disciplines, your cool Hungarian American husband. I mean, what it is that makes you just kind of really tick.
Oh my gosh. Wow. What makes me tick? I love this life. I love all of it. I love, even in the midst of a crappy COVID situation, I take that in and I still embrace it. And I am so thankful. I do practice gratitude every day, throughout the day as well. I'm just grateful for everything that is put in front of me. I'm so blessed with the life that I have. I mean, I adore my husband, and he's tolerated me for far too long.
He loves you.
And I have great kids, and, my son, who's been here since March, who just makes me laugh every day and brings me joy. And my daughter, who's been with us for 2 weeks, and just my kids really are just beautiful beings. I'm very close with my family, not just my own mother and my sisters, my in-laws and my sister-in-law and Stephen's cousins. There was a lot of them. But I really am, I'm so grateful that I live a life that is so full of love. And that is, I think that's really what keeps me going. I'm not going to lie, during this whole pandemic situation, I have experienced, I'm pretty sure, every single human emotion known to man, for, good and bad. And, I'm grateful that I can come out the other end of it and find gratitude somewhere in the midst of the good and the bad and the ugly.
Oh, wow. That was so incredibly beautiful. Thank you. You're also coming to the end of being the director of youth ministry at St. Mark's, which is a great, terrible thing for the rector and for the staff. And you've been telling me for 2 years you're going to do this. I've been in denial for 2 years, and now you really are coming to the end. And this is really your last Sunday, and we're going to have a Celebrate Cyra Sunday in the fall when we all can regather and celebrate you. But you have lived a life of love, caring for the young people of our parish, and the young people have grown up, and you have cast your bread upon the water. You have loved them, helped to love them into life. It takes more than a parent or two to to raise a child, and you've been that other adult in so many people's lives with unconditional love, just simply unconditional love. You can see it, and they showed up for your love. They really did. And so I want to just give a word of gratitude to you for that, and for all of them, and also a word of gratitude for all those who can't speak through the Zoom, which is your incredible passion for those who are struggling in the world, and whether or not that has to do with mental health issues, or people who have no food, or have great challenges trying to keep a roof over their head. You've always brought us as a church out into the edges of the community, the parts of the community that are easily not seen, or easily overlooked, or glanced away from. You look straight into the midst of, and you marched us there with a kind of happy, holy heart, and said, "Come on, friends, let's go serve. Let's go serve along with these people. You're going to love them." And you just, it's been so true. You've brought us to beautiful places, and we're really, really thankful for that.
Thank you.
You want to reconsider stepping down?
No,
Okay.
I have other things that I have to.
That's the last word. No, I was just doing this whole thing to get to that point. Cyra, you're the best. Thank you for sharing about your life, how very meaningful it is for us. And we know that it brings a certain vulnerability, but you've given a holiness to that, and we're grateful, and we can all grow from that. So peace and blessings to you and to your household. I know I'll talk to you again. God bless you.
Ciao.
Yeah, bye.